Ask any sci-fi film fan as to what their favourite sci-fi film trilogy is, and it's virtually guaranteed that they'll mention the original Star Wars trilogy of A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Or they'll mention the Avengers film series, if you combine Endgame into one film. Here at Filmfellas, we'd like to argue that the greatest sci-fi film trilogy is in fact Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and A Voyage Home. And it's high time that sci-fi film fans, and in fact any film fan, reappraise these 80s movies for their sheer brilliance of filmmaking, in script work, acting, score, and overall invention. So sit back, set faces to stun, and hear the Filmfellas out as we argue why Star Trek 2, 3, and 4 is the greatest sci-fi movie trilogy. Despite mixed reviews at the time of its release and poor box office performance, Star Trek The Motion Picture still stands as a defining piece of Star Trek. It's a film that has divided critics and fans, and one that the production team behind the film have long been waiting to restore, due to its rushed nature of post-production, as David C. Fine highlighted in an interview with Gizmodo. The goal in 1979 was to put a coherent film into theatres. Not a great film, not a fine-tuned film, but a film in theatres. In fact, a lot of reviews of the motion picture often refer to it as the motionless picture for its lack of action, and it also criticised that there's no real villain in the film to show. Aspects picked up in the modern-day review by Den of Geek. The main reason why I think that people have trouble connecting with this film, which is that even with all the space is dangerous stuff, the main threat never feels particularly visceral. Empire reaffirming this opinion. Although the slow, gabby and frankly rather insipid Star Trek The Motion Picture did the business, it was pretty lame to all but the most dedicated, particularly coming 2 years in the wake of Star Wars. Following the failure of the motion picture, the film future of Star Trek was put in serious doubt, and a further film was only greenlit under the condition that budgets would be severely cut. Rather than go over the production aspects of each film and their storylines, which are well known, we'll instead look at the certain aspects of the films which we believe elevate them above any other trilogy. The first thing we'll cover is the inventive and expansive nature of the story arc and the sheer brilliance of the writing work. A story arc that covers an old adversary coming back, resulting in the death of its beloved character, the birth of a new planet, reincarnation and sacrifice, then the journey to save mankind that has a timely message that's as relevant as it is now as it was in the 1980s. When you compare the writing of this trilogy to movies such as Star Wars Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, it really is head and shoulders above. In the last Star Wars trilogy, you had character arcs that went nowhere, decisions made by characters in seniority that were just downright bizarre or just simply out of character. Plot decisions that were as if they'd come from the imagination of a 12-year-old and made no sense. A fleet of over 1,000 Star Destroyers with planet-destroying cannons that nobody knew about. Come on. It's like the writers wrote the first draft and just said, "Well, that'll do." Now compare that to this Star Trek trilogy, which stays true to its characters, has very considered plot points, motivations, and has several secondary and tertiary story arcs that just add weight to the proceedings. The father connecting with his son only to have him ripped away cruelly. Two characters connecting emotionally due to a shared experience culminating in a growth in mutual respect. A key character rediscovering their human side and discovering the meaning of friendship. The overall growth of a family unit that care and fight for each other. No stupid actions used to score points for either gender or creating a Mary Sue at the expense of all the other characters around them. In fact, the characters in Star Trek aren't perfect. They make mistakes, but importantly, they learn and grow, which is life. In today's Hollywood, there's none of this, because one gender must be perfect in today's films and the other must be made to look inferior, almost bumbling in comparison. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan has quite possibly what is regarded as two of the greatest space battles in sci-fi movie history. The brilliance of these battles lies in the fact that the main body of action takes place on the bridge of the ships and uses very little special effects. And this is largely thanks to the budget cuts following the motion picture's failure, as highlighted by William Shatner. When Star Trek the motion picture didn't hit as brilliantly as they thought it might, and they were not going to make any other movies, the head of Paramount said, "Let's make them for a cheaper price." And he hired a television producer, Harve Bennett, to do it on essentially a television budget, which meant more emphasis on the story and less on expensive effects. And if the opinion is that this is amongst the best of the Star Treks, I wholly concur. In fact, it's safe to say that it's probably an 80-20 rule in favour of script and performance over effects, unlike today's lazy sci-fi movies that reverse this weighting. So when the special effects appear in The Wrath of Khan, this really did add impact to proceedings. In the first battle, Kirk is caught off guard, but can get the Enterprise to limp away by exploiting Khan's lack of Starfleet knowledge to send the command override instead of the promised Genesis plans. This means he can lower the Reliant shields remotely and disable their weapons and inflict some crucial damage to even the odds for the second space battle. Watch this battle closely, and there's some beautiful nuance going on in terms of direction from Nicholas Meyer. Even Shatner's performance and the delivery of his line, "Here it comes," is absolutely perfectly pitched. The silence and the introduction of the music with the delivery of the line, "Clear the bridge," which triggers the start of Kirk's plan to escape, is such a subtle and considered piece of filmmaking craft that it has long been lost in today's desire to have frantic action sequences that leave you no time to question what is happening. Take note, J.J. Abrams. This care and attention is carried over into the film's final space battle, which ensues epicness for suspense and emotional weight. The final act being a cat and mouse game in a nebula that has Kirk using his experience as a Starfleet captain to outwit his foe, who looks like he may have the last laugh until a huge twist at the end saves the Enterprise. A huge thanks for the success of Star Trek II has to go to the previously mentioned Nicholas Meyer, a successful novelist turned director, who understood that the interplay between the characters was as important as the impressive special effects. And it's probably no surprise that he would go on to direct what many considered to be one of the best Star Trek movies after Wrath of Khan in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Other praise needs to go to the scriptwriter, who provided the platform to create a truly strong and memorable outing that rescued the Star Trek film franchise, as highlighted by Empire magazine. Jack B. Sowood's script is witty and literate. The crew are on top self-mocking form, and there are neat references to Dickens and Melville, but Wrath of Khan is capped by a daring shocker, killing a beloved character to press home such weighty Trekkian sentiments as the need of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. Not quite as good as Voyages 2 or 4, but light years ahead of 1, Leonard Spock Nimoy's directorial debut has Kirk and crew going AWOL with the Enterprise to chase after their fallen comrade. Director Nimoy's task was not only to come up with a story that could plausibly bring Spock back from the dead, but to continue the expansion of the series and bring more elements from the TV series into the movie continuity. The original script, however, differed wildly from the finished version. For a start, the planet Genesis would be stable and become Spock's home. He would be discovered by a Romulan mining party who would die at his hand. At the same time, there would be a civil war with Vulcan in the aftermath of the Genesis device. Elements of this early story would remain in the final script, which would focus on the power of friendships and loss. Not just personal loss in the shape of Kirk losing his son, but also the loss of the Enterprise itself. Interestingly, in the run-up to the release of the film, Paramount decided to make it the focus of the trailers, which drummed up the interest but ruined the film's dramatic twist. But one of the most loved scenes in the film amongst all sci-fi fans is the stealing of the Enterprise. Like the first action scene in The Wrath of Khan, the scene is a masterclass in restraint and allows Nimoy to show that he is a filmmaker who understands the importance of pace and payoff in an action scene. It also allows him to showcase how much he knows the characters and the roles that they play, as he highlighted in his book, I Am Spock. In part, I think I was influenced by my experience on Mission Impossible, where each character had a specific job to complete in any given adventure. We worked very consciously to define the special moments for each of the Enterprise bridge crew. Nimoy also understood the effect a great score and composer can have on a film. Hats off to James Horner, who would take over from Jerry Goldsmith and handle the score for both Nimoy's outings as director. The score during the stealing of the Enterprise sets up them getting the space doors open, with a soaring payoff that simply puts a smile on audiences' faces.
We have cleared space doors.
Another key aspect of the film that deserves praise is also the casting of Christopher Lloyd as the main villain and the introduction of the Bird of Prey that would become an iconic vehicle in the Star Trek movies to follow. As we mentioned before, one of the key aspects of this film, ruined a little bit by Paramount, is the destruction of the Enterprise, which follows the death of Kirk's son. It's an act of self-destruction that showcases that Kirk will do absolutely anything to avenge his son's murder, including destroying the ship that he had so wanted to get back control of in the previous films. These days, we seem used to the Enterprise being destroyed, but no film following this has managed to capture the emotional weight of the ship being obliterated and give it the send-off it deserves with a combination of brilliant direction, solid special effects, stunning cinematography, and a beautiful emotional driving score. All of these elements join to create a film that is massively underrated in the Star Trek film series, and is actually a stronger part of what makes this particular trilogy of films work and beautifully sets up the third film.
My God, Bones. What have I done?
Many films struggle with the third film in a trilogy. Return of the Jedi is often regarded as the weakest in the original trilogy. The Godfather Part 3 never hits the heights of the previous films. The Rise of Skywalker is by far the worst in the last Star Wars trilogy. But this Star Trek trilogy saved its best film until the very end. Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home won rave reviews and was a hit at the box office, and stylistically is very different to the two previous films, with no real true action set pieces. In fact, the film released in 1986 probably owes a slight debt to a film released just a year prior. 1985's Cocoon, starring Steve Guttenberg. A film that mixed sci-fi ideas with the universal truth of aging, and wanted to recapture your youth with touching moments combined with a few laughs. And The Voyage Home delivers all of this in spades. The plot revolves around a probe that is destroying Earth with its signals. The Enterprise crew determines that the probe is zeroing in on Earth because it has not had any signals from humpback whales in hundreds of years, and that, if no humpback whale songs are picked up in response, the planet may well be destroyed. Therefore, the crew must journey back through time to the 20th century, obtain some humpback whales, and return with them to the future, thus saving Earth. It might sound daft, but it really works, and gives plenty of opportunity for lots of fish out of water jokes, and of course America's mistrust of Russia at the time. The famed movie critic Roger Ebert sums up this film perfectly. When they finished writing the script for Star Trek IV, they must have had a lot of silly grins on their faces. This is easily the most absurd of the Star Trek stories, and yet, oddly enough, it is also the best, the funniest, and the most enjoyable in simply human terms. The Voyage Home opened up the franchise to its widest audience yet, and for the decades after stood as the biggest grossing film in the series. With little or no special effects and no battles, we really get to focus on what a talented bunch of actors Gene Roddenberry assembled back in 1966. And it's refreshing to see them in an ensemble piece, rather than a story being squarely aimed at Kirk or Spock. It also succeeds by being genuinely funny, and Nimoy's script and direction has a warmth and depth comic touch to it that is enjoyable to all. A skill he would take into his follow-up film and box office smash, 3 Men and a Baby. It's no surprise that when Collider ranked all of the Star Trek films, that the films mentioned in this episode of Film Fillers were placed in their top 3. These films highlight not only the best of Trek, but also what we miss about the skill of expert writing and skilled direction. They were created at a time when the whole idea of rewrites was not a dirty word. They harnessed the belief of Michael Crichton. Great books aren't written, they're rewritten. They also harness the belief that a director should understand the characters in the film they are making just as much as the actors, and they stay true to those characters and not change their behaviour because it suits the politics of the time. Yes, Star Trek IV has an environmental message, but it's not a forced one. It makes its point and moves on. All in all, these films come from an age of sci-fi writing and filmmaking that is truly lost in today's Hollywood. One that focuses on talent above delivering the woke message, and one that has true love and respect for its source material. So that's why film fellas are putting our neck on the line and calling Star Trek 2, 3 and 4 the best sci-fi trilogy ever. Agree or disagree? Then why not comment below? Like this video? Then please subscribe, like and share, and don't forget to chat to us on Twitter at FilmFellasUK. Thanks for watching.